Good evening and welcome to this Christmas Eve edition of APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Nunavut residents have faced an awful lot over the last 12 months, from political turnover to political protest. The territory has seen some firsts this year. Some of those firsts were momentous, others residents would rather forget. Here's our Kent Driscoll with a look at the year that was in Nunavut.
2021 began much the way 2020 ended here in Nunavut, with COVID-19 taking up a lot of the space in the room. In particular, the room behind me, the Nunavut Legislative Assembly. Here's the neat part. These press conferences were broadcast live on the Legislative Assembly's television feed, so they were seen in real time territory-wide. Then an interesting thing started to happen. Viewers started sending reporters their own questions or information contrary to what the government was saying in real time. Here's a great example. I'd been getting notes from teachers territory-wide about how the learning packages the schools sent home during COVID closures weren't even being marked. So I asked the education minister about it. The teachers, when they put out the packages, were asked to focus on numbers and letters, numeracy and literacy, the basics. But they're being asked to grade these report cards full of subjects that they've barely taught, and even in the last semester have taught remotely. How can these report cards be any sort of meaningful guide for parents if they're being graded on such small amounts of material?
Minister Joanna Seda,
just to build off the experience that we've had, and yes, we are focusing on and emphasizing literacy, numeracy, as well as the well-being of our students. This is where we're asking, our teachers know the students the best, and this is where our education system has to meet the students where they're at.
It wasn't all bad news for Nunavut students. COVID vaccines were rolled out for teenagers in the summer and for everyone 5 and up by the end of the year. This year also brought us a protest movement unlike anything ever seen in Nunavut before. The Mary River iron ore mine is located halfway in between Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay, Nunavut. Protesters traveled to the mine by snowmobile and blocked the runway and access road, right in the middle of the Nunavut Impact Review Board meeting in Pond Inlet about the mine's proposed expansion. They held out for a week until a Nunavut judge issued an injunction. The decision about the mine is now in Ottawa's hands. The Impact Review Board will make a recommendation to the federal cabinet, who can accept or reject it. This story will be coming back in 2022. You can count on it. 2021 was also a big year for political change here in Nunavut, and much of that change came from people who were heavily involved in that Mary River iron ore mine project. Lori Iqaluit was the lawyer for the protesters. Now she's the NDP MP for Nunavut. She replaced Mumilak Kakak, who decided not to run for a second term. Kakak did release a scathing report into Nunavut's housing problems. Her methods were questioned by Nunavut's old guard politicians, but she stood firm.
Because a lot of people were quite, to put it bluntly, very angry with me for not following GN process and procedure. I don't work for the GN. I don't work for the Housing Corporation. I don't work for NTI. I work for the constituents. I have no obligation to go through any proper policy and procedure.
Another big shift in the political landscape was late in the year, when former QIA President PJ Iqaluit defeated incumbent Premier Joseph Iqaluit to become Premier of Nunavut. QIA is the regional Inuit association. They're also basically the landlord for the Mary River iron ore project. After years of backing Mary River, Iqaluit and QIA moved off that position as the protests mounted. Then he resigned to run for the Legislative Assembly. This is a Iqaluit, a massive igloo designed to host a meeting or party. Iqaluit is a Nunavut group that advocates for a performance space for Inuit performers. They built this to give us a break from the constant COVID reminders and to remind us that Nunavut still doesn't have a performing arts center.
Bringing awareness to what we really need here. Iqaluit's been advocating for an actual real performing arts center in Nunavut, and I hope that this helps bring out the issue.
Mary Simon was selected this year as the first Inuk to hold the role of Governor General and has been using Inuktitut on the job frequently. Simon isn't from Nunavut, but the Inuktitut's being heard loud and clear. Just ask Nunavut's language commissioner.
She spoke in Inuktitut first. She's very proud of her language, and we even saw in the media coverage of having, I believe, 8 additional Indigenous languages that were broadcasted today, including in the Inuit language. So she's already shone a brighter light on not only the Inuit language, but Indigenous languages.
Leaving the world of politics and back to the basics, on October 12th, Iqaluit residents found out we can't drink the tap water. And for 60 long days, we couldn't. This fuel tank was the culprit. It was lodged underground next to the city's water filtration plant. Fuel from the tank got into the system, making the water toxic enough that you couldn't boil the problem away. For the next 2 months, the armed forces fought the elements to try and provide water. They were successful for 13 days in total. The government of Nunavut flew in bottled water, and that was Iqaluit residents drinking water for 2 months. As for the tank, it was buried there in 1995. No one knows why, including Iqaluit's mayor.
It was buried, it was cemented over. There was a staircase. There was, 3 feet of earth put over it to be never found again. How does that make any sense?
In 2022, we're still going to be trying to make sense of why that tank was buried next to the water supply. We're still going to be hearing about the Mary River iron ore mine, as the federal cabinet will have to make a decision about the expansion. And we're still going to be hearing about COVID-19. 2022 looks like it'll be a lot like 2021, for good or ill. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
We want to hear what you think about what happened this year in Nunavut. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, we'll take a look back at what happened in the Yukon in 2021. Stay with us. Welcome back to this Christmas Eve edition of APTN National News. It's been an interesting year for news in the Yukon. Our White Horse Bureau has covered everything from a wealthy Vancouver couple skipping the vaccine line to a territorial election that resulted in names being pulled out of a box and a whole lot in between. Here's Sarah Connors with a review of the Yukon's most memorable stories of 2021.
We started off the year in the Yukon on an uplifting note. In January, we brought you this story on Thomas Fawcett, a carver for the Carcross-Tagish First Nation. Back in 2016, the Tlingit man was living in Vancouver, where he was homeless and addicted to crack and heroin. Suicidal and with nowhere to go, he traveled from Vancouver to his mother's home community of Carcross. He took up carving and is now a full-time carver for the First Nation. The art also helped him beat his addictions.
It's really good healing. It's therapy. And it's healed me so much from all the things that all the trauma that I've had and stuff in my life.
Perhaps one of the biggest stories to come out of the Yukon this year was the Bakers. In January, the wealthy Vancouverite couple ignored COVID protocols and chartered a private flight to the small community of Beaver Creek to get early access to the Moderna vaccine. Their actions outraged the White River First Nation located there.
And I think I was just more upset too because my father was there and he's at high risk, and it's just very upsetting.
The pair was fined a total of $2,300.
There you go. That's it. That's it. That's done.
When it came to COVID-19 vaccinations, the Yukon led the country earlier this year. By mid-January, 23.5% of the territory's adult population received their first dose of the Moderna vaccine. Yukon First Nations helped lead the charge by educating citizens about the vaccine.
I am really opposed to the mine.
A more controversial story we followed is the proposed Kutzakaya mine in southeastern Yukon. If approved, the project will be in an area important to the Kaska people of Liard First Nation and Ross River Dina Council. In March, we spoke to Ann Rader of the Liard Aboriginal Women's Society. She fears an increase of male miners to the area could harm Kaska women. She's also concerned the mine could negatively impact the Finlayson caribou herd.
What's concerning is that herd has dwindled to about 1,500 caribou. From a herd that used to be probably hundreds of thousands at one time.
But the mine's operators, BMC Minerals, says they'll do things the right way if the mine goes ahead, like implementing a strong remediation program. A decision on the future of the mine has not yet been released.
We certainly didn't recognize the need for this policy before it was announced.
Another story muddled in controversy this year was the First Nations procurement policy. Under the policy, businesses have advantages when obtaining government tender bids, depending on how much of the business is owned by or employs First Nations people, among other things. Its aim is to award 15% of all territorial government procurement contracts to Yukon First Nations businesses. While many supported the policy, non-First Nations contractors like Clint Tykro were not on board, arguing it gave an unfair advantage.
And this policy aims to take from one group of people and give to another based on the color of their skin. And I have very serious concerns about that.
Despite the backlash, the policy is now fully in effect. Turning to politics, this year's territorial election was one for the books. NDP candidate Annie Blake and Liberal candidate Pauline Frost tied in the riding of the Vuntut-Gwitchin in Old Crow. The tie was broken when Blake's name was pulled from a box. Frost challenged Blake's win in court, claiming one person who voted in the election didn't live in the riding and their vote should be disqualified. But a judge ruled in Blake's favor, and Frost has since been ordered to pay a portion of Blake's legal cost. In September, we traveled to the Champagne and Ajac First Nations in Haines Junction to see how master carver Wayne Price was helping youth carve a healing canoe.
The Western Red Cedar gave its life for us to take it, bring it here, carve it, and work on it, and give it a new life.
Youth apprentices like Carcross Tagish First Nation citizen Lawrence Patterson Smith says working on the dugout helped him feel more connected to his culture.
Really important in our culture to know this type of stuff, and it's something that's slowly disappearing, but with Wayne traveling around and teaching everybody, I don't think it will disappear now.
The dugout is set to hit the water next year for a Tlingit gathering and celebration. In September, we also attended the unveiling of the Finding Peace Monument. Dozens gathered to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit Plus people of the Yukon and northern BC.
It's an opportunity for the general public to become aware of the history and to begin to ask questions about when they see a monument like this, like why is it here?
Here we have our emergency response supplies, so we have oxygen, naloxone, bag valve masks, and AED.
That same month, we also got a first-hand look at Northern Canada's first supervised consumption site. The site provides drug users with a safe, clean environment to use pre-obtained drugs in the presence of trained staff.
We got into a booth. The red bins that you see are for the disposal.
Bronte Renwick Shields, Executive Director for Blood Ties, an advocacy group which operates the site, says it's a much-needed support in the Yukon.
We know that supervised consumption has saved many lives and will continue to save lives, and that they are an extremely important part of ending overdose death.
Staying with opioids, in November, the Yukon Coroner's Service announced Yukon is leading Canada in overdose deaths. Since 2016, 54 people have died in the territory from the illicit use of opioids. Yukon's opioid deaths per a population of 100,000 has now surpassed BC at 48.4 deaths.
It really excites me to go down with such a positive group.
Ending the year on a more positive note, we spent some time with the Yukon First Nations wildfire firefighters as they were preparing to go to BC to help the province with its flood response. Little Salmon Carmack's First Nations squadron leader Tanner Borsa told us he was looking forward to helping Yukon's southern neighbor.
It's really a chance for everyone to get that experience and show what our company is capable of doing.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
All right, we need to step aside for one more break, but stick around. For the first time in 150 years, buffalo are back roaming on a Saskatchewan First Nation. That story next. Welcome back to this Christmas Eve edition of APTN National News. Inuit living in Manitoba will have a chance to taste their country foods thanks to a new hamper program. The Manitoba Inuit Association launched the program when COVID hit. Now our reporter Michelle Karlenzig takes us inside for a closer look.
Dolly Tinashalu misses country food from her hometown, Nauyat, Nunavut. The 65-year-old Inuk now lives in Winnipeg, and thanks to an Inuit hamper program, she gets a taste of home.
I get Arctic char, caribou, and makta. Makta is
whale.
Yeah.
Manitoba Inuit Association started the hamper program when the pandemic hit, providing essentials like food and toiletries to Inuks in the province. Janelle Samertuck is the program coordinator.
They're really struggling right now. Especially we saw with COVID, people lost their jobs and they didn't really have anything. So we thought this was the best way that we could help them.
The program has helped people like Tinashalu and her husband Nelson. They used to present Inuit culture in schools, but then COVID-19 shut down that income. Nelson says the Inuit Association helps with more than just food delivery.
If we have problems, we can go to them. And they have the resources. They know where to send us, direct us in the right ways and stuff like that.
Samertuck says the feedback from the hamper program has been positive and enjoys helping families in need.
To me, it's really empowering to be able to help my community, to know that there's a lot of people out there struggling and that we're able to give them just something to even go through a few weeks and have food.
The association relies on funding from Indigenous Services Canada. Samertuck says as long as COVID continues and they receive funding, the hamper program will continue. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
For the first time in 150 years, buffalo are back roaming on Cody First Nation in Saskatchewan. Now, hundreds of people were on hand to welcome the return of the sacred animal. APTN's Leanne Sanders has the story.
Buffalo is something Chief George Cody has been working toward for 4 years. 24 buffalo, including 2 bulls, quickly explored their new home, 900 acres of wooded pasture land on the First Nation near Kamsack, Saskatchewan. Everyone from school kids to elders were on hand to celebrate alongside Chief Cody.
We as First Nations people, we fought to where we are today, and
and we're really grateful that the buffalo is increasing in numbers as well as a result of what happened in history. So it's something that, Canada should know, non-First Nations people, that, we're really proud of how First Nations are working together along with the non-First Nations to bring the buffalo home.
The buffalo are part of an act of reconciliation. They were donated by an Alberta rancher and 2 Christian charities, Tear Fund Canada and Loco Koa, a Samoan youth ministry. The animals were hauled over 900 kilometers to their new home. Cody is the 3rd First Nation in Saskatchewan to welcome the buffalo back. Pepikasis and Zagame First Nations now have well-established herds. Cody says there have been many difficult years, but First Nations people are resilient, like the buffalo, which were hunted almost to extinction by settlers.
This just brings a sense of calmness and peacefulness to our spirit, to know that the buffalo have returned to our home.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Cody First Nation.
That's a wrap for us on this Christmas Eve edition of APTN National News. Thank you so much for joining us, and we are leaving you with a performance of A Christmas Carol by Métis singer Mary Stinchcombe. I'm Daryl Stranger. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.